Okay, we're good to go. Go for it.
Okay. All right, so hello everyone, and welcome to this Gymnastics BC webinar on goal setting and reflection. My name is Jessie Jenkins, and I've been involved with Gymnastics BC my entire life. I am a true BC girl. It's been an honor to be included in these webinars and presentations with Gymnastics BC. I've been working really hard for the last couple of years to develop my skill set as a professional coach. I've just completed the Masters in High Performance Coaching and Technical Leadership through the University of British Columbia, as well as the Advanced Coaching Diploma. And both of them were incredible experiences. And I know I said this last time, but I'll say it again, I will pump those programs if any coach is ready to challenge themselves as a professional and stretch their ability. I would highly, highly recommend hopping into one of those programs. It would just really help our sport to grow, and it just gives you so much more knowledge and a greater network as a professional. So yeah, that's me. I've been coaching in BC for the last 15 years. I currently live in Kelowna, and I coach at Kelowna Gymnastics and West Kelowna Gymnastics. And it's been a really, really crazy last few months, but I'm happy everybody's here, and hopefully you can take something away from this presentation today. So the outline for this webinar, I've split it into two parts. The first part is going to be centered around athletes and how we can set SMART goals with athletes and start to create goal setting dialogue. We'll also talk about developmental stage goal setting, planning, journaling and reflection, timing, ideas and examples to use while coaching. So that whole part one is about how we, the coach and the leader, can start to teach goal setting and reflection to our athletes. And then the second part of this presentation is going to be around the benefits of goal setting and reflection for coaches and for ourselves. We'll look at tools for reflection such as an R card and personal reflections and values, as well as some reflection questions that we can go over and kind of use as professionals to make sure that we're continuing to grow and learn and develop. So those are the two parts. The first, it may get kind of blendy at times between the two concepts, but just understand that the goal of this presentation is that you're starting to understand the concepts of goal setting, reflection, and then how you could apply that as the leader to your athletes, and then how you can use that personally to start to improve yourself as well. So what is a SMART goal? So SMART, this is an acronym. It's been around for a long time in goal setting, and I'm sure lots of coaches have seen presentations similar to this. But the S is for specific. So we're creating goals that are well-defined, clear, and unambiguous. The M is for measurable. We're creating specific criteria that measures your progress towards the accomplishment of the goal. Achievable. We're creating attainable and not impossible goals. Realistic. Within reach, realistic, and relevant to your life purpose, which is really important as we move forward. And timely. There's a clearly defined timeline, including a starting date and a target date. The purpose is to create urgency. So this SMART goal acronym just simplifies the way that you can develop goals and work through goal setting with yourself and with your athletes. And it just makes sure that you're hitting on the most important parts of goal setting. So moving forward, we're just going to talk about each individual part of the SMART goal setting. So specific. Goals that are specific have a significantly greater chance of being accomplished. And in order to create our specific goals, we're going to use the 5 W questions. Who, what, where, when, and why. So when we're writing our goals, we're looking at these 5 W's. Who is it about? What is it for? Where does it take place? When does it take place? And why are we doing it? And that's how we're creating that specific portion of the goal for our goal setting. Okay? Measurable. So measurable goals must include a criteria for measuring progress. It provides a way to determine if you are on track to reach your goal. So some questions for the measurability of your goal might include things like how many or how much, how do I know if I have reached my goal, and what might be an indicator of my progress, right? So when we're working with athletes, we want to try to encourage them to create this measurable goal so that they know how they've reached it and what their indicator of progress is. And you might have to guide them and help them through these processes to make sure that they are creating these SMART goals. Achievable. The achievability should be stretched to make you feel challenged, but defined well enough that you can actually achieve it. And this is important when we're working with athletes and when we're the leader, working with them, building these goal setting sessions and working on their mental skills. We want to make sure that we're not overstretching them. We're not putting a goal in their mind that's too big or something that they can't comprehend. It has to be toned down, something that they can compartmentalize and understand, that stretches them but helps and that they can achieve. So here we want to ask, do I have the resources and capabilities to achieve the goal? And if not, what am I missing? Additionally, we want to ask, have others done it successfully before? Is this even possible? And these are all going to help us to understand if the goals are achievable and to be able to create those achievable goals. Okay, the R is for realistic. So goals must be realistically achieved given the resources and the time. Likely, a SMART goal is realistic if you believe that it can be accomplished. And that's really critical for our athletes. We want to make sure that the goals that they're setting and working towards, that they believe it, that they believe they can accomplish it, because it has to come from within. Same with ourselves when we're setting our own goals. It has to be our choice so that it's coming from within, and that's going to make a big difference. And that's sometimes hard to manage when we're trying to set goals with our athletes, especially when we have really high standards or high hopes for a particular athlete. It's good to make sure that we're making sure it's realistic. So again, is the goal realistic and within reach? Is the goal reachable given the time and the resources? And are you able to commit to achieving the goal? Which is also really important for ourselves and for our athletes. Is it something that they want to do? Are they willing to go all in to achieve that goal? So this is for the R, for that acronym for the SMART goals. Moving on to the T. So the T for goal setting is for timely. Goals must be time bound in that there is a start and finish date. If the goal is not restrained, there will be no sense of urgency and motivation to achieve the goal. So questions in the area of timely would include things like, does my goal have a deadline? By when do you want to achieve your goal? So as you're working through your goal setting and writing out your goals, you want to start to create these types of deadlines or some type of restraint around the goal so that the athlete starts to understand, okay, this is my goal, this is when I want to achieve it by. And that's really going to help. So that's why we're using this SMART acronym, and I'm just going over it here for everybody so that you can understand the steps that it takes and the questions that we should be asking our athletes or ourselves to create those detailed goals that are going to really let us focus on them and work to achieve them. So the next step for goal setting is planning. So once you've made a SMART goal, it's time to plan it out. So with my athletes and what I've done in the past, and everybody can do this in their own way, in their own style, but I've broken maybe our goal setting sessions into a few different sessions, or we do different parts of the goal setting at different times, depending on what we're trying to accomplish. But at this point, maybe after your athletes have written out their goal and it's SMART and it's got a timeline, then we might want to be asking, okay, what are the steps involved with the goal? What resources do you need? What do you already have? And who can help you? And this is a really good process, I think, to work through with your athletes. So once you've done all those other steps of creating a SMART goal, then we want them to go even deeper again into working through what steps are they going to do to achieve it? And maybe they can break it down even further. So for example, in gymnastics, we have a lot of athletes that might say, you know, my goal is to compete my back handspring on beam this year. Or have my back handspring ready by the first competition of the season. So if that's their goal and they've created that, there's a timeline and they have a purpose, right? Then we want to get them to break down the steps. So maybe that athlete has to start to understand, well, that means I need to have it mastered on the line. Then I need to have it mastered on the medium beam. I have to work really hard on my drills, and that's going to prepare me. I'm going to have to be brave and courageous to go for that skill. And that's the kind of thing that you want them to start to write out in more detail again and below their goal, so that they are really starting to understand the plan, and then they can implement it and have action. And that gives them a good way to track their progress and to see where they are within their goals. So the goal plan, it should include, so for the goal plan, you want to have your athletes write out the steps towards achieving their goal. You want to make sure they have a plan, and that's going to help them. You want to guide them to understand what it takes, support their ideas, and back them up. So the reason I've added this slide into the presentation is because when we're the leaders and we're teaching mental training sessions such as goal setting, whatever else it might be, reflection, planning, okay? It's our job as the leader to always support the athlete and always back them up, which is occasionally hard to do, so you have to be creative. For example, you're doing a goal setting session and you have that athlete who puts up their hand and says, I'm gonna learn a double back this year. That's my goal. And you as the coach, you know that might not be particularly the right goal for that athlete. But in that moment in the group, when you're having conversation about goals, it's not appropriate to call them out and to say, well, that goal is not realistic and totally unreachable, try again, right? We want to support their ideas and back them up. So in that moment, as the leader, it's our job to go, okay, that's a great idea. Is there something, you know, that's close to that that would still make you feel like you were successful? And then focus on that. And it's your job to guide them to the appropriate goal, again, to that one that stretches them and is achievable. And I think that's really important to reiterate to the coaches as we're working through, is just make sure you're there for them, you're supporting them, and you're backing them up through these goal setting sessions, because they need to know that you believe in them just as much as they themselves. And it's your job as the professional, because you have the experience, to ensure that they are creating smart goals that are attainable and reachable. Okay, so this slide has a lot going on, but it was kind of fun to develop. So what I did was I went back and I reread the long-term athlete development document that's on the Gymnastics Canada website, and it's been there for several years. And what I did was I tried to pull out some information so that we can see how we would be adapting our goal setting and our reflection sessions throughout the stages of development with our athletes. Because I recognize that everyone in this presentation and people who are watching, we're coaching all levels, all over the place. So I wanted to kind of give some opportunity for us to start to understand what type of goal setting we could be doing in different age, in different stages, and what that might look like, and how we, the leader, can start to implement it and bring goal setting throughout the development of our athletes. So the first stage is active start, which is 0 to 6 years old for boys and girls. And what we know is that reasoning processes are limited until the age of 7. So what that tells us, if we're a preschool coach, if we're working with active start aged athletes, is that the athletes are not quite ready cognitively to start to reason or create maybe their own ideas for what that goal might be. So in the active start stage, it's our job as the professional to be providing some language around goal setting and to be bringing it into our classes. So in that case, it might be more along the lines of, as a group, our goal is to be able to, each of us, to do 1 chin-up by the end of this session. You know, and you get the kids to dive into that and be like, yes, I am gonna figure out 1 chin-up by the end of this session. And that's good, because you're guiding them. You're the leader in that active start stage. It's your job to kind of start to create that language, create the goals, and get those little kids to start to work towards goals and understand what that would look like. Okay, then there's the fun, fitness, and fundamental movement patterns. So this is for females age 6 to 8 and males 6 to 8 and 9. You'll see a little bit of overlap in the years, and that's in the document as well. So because we know that not everyone matures or changes at the same time. So just use your judgment when you have to. So for this stage, we know the attention span is short and children are action oriented. We have to emphasize participation and fun versus winning. So we want to focus on the process, not the outcome. And again, have lots of fun. And I've taken this right out of the long-term athlete development document. So what we can do here with our goal setting and our planning for goal setting is we know that their children are probably not going to want to sit down and do a goal setting session, right? Because they're action oriented. So we're going to have to adapt that into something more exciting for them. You know, maybe we're putting our goals up on the wall for everybody to see or something like that. And we want to, again, be focused on the process and having fun. So maybe those goals are about how much fun they can have in the gym or how much fun they can have while working on getting those 5 chin-ups in a row, whatever that's going to look like, okay? Then moving into building the skills of gymnastics. So females 7 to 9, males 9 to 10. So we're maturing and we're growing up through the stages. And here we know that decision-making through more complex technical training should start to be introduced, and that abstract thinking becomes more firmly established. So by this phase, we as the leaders or as the coaches can start to implement some more of that technical language and some of that abstract thinking. So this may be a good stage to start to implement some of that of their own goal setting, or maybe their own processing. They're probably able to read and write, so maybe they could sit down and do a little goal setting session at this time. Okay, so then we're moving forward to specialization in a gym discipline. Females 9 to 11 and males 10 to 12. Here, the coach is usually better accepted than other adults and should always attempt to foster two-way communication. Young athletes should have input into decision-making processes. Values and attitudes are being created and reinforced by the group. So as we're in the specialization in a gym discipline stage, we know that the coach is really, really, really important for the athlete. Our job as the leader, we are a strong influence in the athlete's life during this phase. So this is a good time to start to bring forward some of those decision-making processes. They are cognitively prepared to start to do some of these processes on their own or with a little bit of guidance, okay? And then moving into becoming a consistent competitor. Females 10 to 11 all the way to 13, and males 12 to 15 or more. This is probably one of the most full categories, one of the categories that we probably likely coach in the most if we're coaching competitive gymnastics. And athletes, what we know here is that athletes can cope with multiple strategies and tactics, particularly near the end of this phase. The capacity or self-analysis and correction is developing. Self-concept is still very much influenced by success and failure, and coping techniques are useful. So by this phase, the athlete is mature enough and ready to do more detailed goal setting and or reflection. So what we know, because we know that they have the capacity for some self-analysis and correction, and they're developing those skills. So it's our job as the leader through that phase to start to ask the athletes to challenge themselves deeper with their goal setting, make it more detailed, have more detailed planning, put the onus on the athlete at this phase because they're ready to start to take on some of that information. Then we go to winning at all levels, females 13 to 14 all the way to 18 plus, and males 15 to 18 years. And if you're a coach fortunate enough to be working with athletes in this category, then you know that it's a very challenging few years, and it's really important that we're always thinking ahead and trying to really connect with the athletes so that we can keep them involved with the sport, because this is the phase where we lose the most athletes in the sport of artistic gymnastics, and where we as professionals need to band together to reflect and say, what are we doing to keep these athletes in the sport, and how are we keeping them involved with their own process? So in the winning at all levels phases, athletes are capable of self-analysis and can correct and refine skills themselves. Athletes can analyze and conceptualize all facets of their sport. The athlete is ready to assume responsibility and accept consequences of his or her actions. So this is an amazing phase where you can be working on detailed analysis of their performance, their behavior, their actions, and the athlete is ready to conceptualize those processes and to work with you and work with themselves to try to make improvements. Then there's the International Excellence and Podium Performances. So this is for females 16 and up and males 18 and up. Here, goal setting should be strongly emphasized to give definite direction and purpose to the athlete's overall program. Principles of adult learning should be implemented at this stage. So in Canada, we maybe don't have a huge group of athletes in this stage of development, but we have some. And as coaches, this would be a lovely phase to be able to coach in. And we can tell that, and what we know is that the goal setting should be strongly emphasized. There should be definite direction and purpose for the athlete's overall program. And that we know that they can handle adult learning. So this athlete in this stage should be able to do goal setting and reflection on their own and should be doing it fairly actively throughout their workouts and throughout their life. And then lastly, there's the gymnastics for life stage and or active for life, which is any age. So here I just wrote, use your judgment. So you have all the information from all the other stages available to you, and you've had experience with these stages. So when you're working in active for life category or with athletes in that gymnastics for life section, it's your job to use your judgment based on their age, based on their maturity, based on what their goals are in sport. Maybe they're high school athletes. So what type of goals can you direct for the high school athletes? Maybe they are gymnastics for life and they're showing up for a drop-in every Saturday night. They really want to learn a backflip. Okay, so your job as the coach then use your judgment and help that individual so that they can work on goal setting and achieving those goals. So yeah, so this was kind of, I thought this might be good to go over because we talk about goal setting all the time and reflection, we kind of hit one target, but we maybe forget about that variety within the development and how we as the professionals need to change how we provide these sessions to the particular age groups as we move through our career. So next, we want to talk about choosing goals that are in your control. So this does not include medals, scores, rankings, or other people. And this is an interesting concept to start to introduce when you're doing goal setting sessions or working on goal setting with your athletes. Especially the younger athletes, likely the very first thing that they're going to say when you start talking about goal setting is, I want to win beam. So it's your job as the professional to talk to them about that. Say, okay, well, we want to choose goals that are things in our control. So things the athlete can control, how hard they work, how focused they are, how many routines they do before competition day, the quality of those routines, everything that's in their control. So we want to hear what they say. So they say, okay, I want to win beam. And then we want to guide them into a more appropriate goal that's something in their control. It's important to focus on the things in your control and to not let things like medals, scores, and rankings be written down on goal setting sheets, because those are things out of our control. We want to be training our athletes to choose things that are in their control and really work hard to achieve those goals and to work on that self-improvement to achieve their goals. That's the ultimate goal with goal setting. Okay, we want to take a moment when you achieve a goal. Another really important concept. So we do all this work on goal setting. We put effort into how we write the goals, how we plan the goals. Then we put in all that work to achieve the goal, and then it happens. We get it, and it's successful, okay? We want to be present, be in that moment. If you are the coach of an athlete who just achieved a goal, let them enjoy the feeling of success. Let them be in it because they worked so hard. They put all that effort in, all that focus into achieving this goal. Same for yourself. If you personally have made a goal and you've worked so hard for it and then you got it, you achieved it, okay? We want to take a moment to just be in it and let your whole entire system feel that accomplishment feeling, that feeling of accomplishment, okay? As coaches, we have bad habits of moving on right away of, okay, kid, you got first, you stuck your beam routine and you did everything you wanted to do and you got first, great, moving on. I expect you to move up a level and have 3 back handsprings in a row by the end of next week. And the kid's like, whoa, I just figured out 2 back handsprings and that was my goal for the year. So as the professional, we have to back off a little bit, give them at least a day, at least an evening, at least one night to decompress from all that hard work before you're hitting them again with another goal or another thing to challenge them. Because it's just so quick, it's so easy for us as humans to just keep going, go, set a goal, move forward, and we never take that moment to be present and just feel the success because you work so hard for that moment. So it's important that we are giving time to that experience for our athletes. Okay, I'm gonna introduce journaling and some benefits for athletes. So the concept of journaling has been around for a long time. I personally journal a little bit as a professional just to keep myself kind of going, make sure that I'm writing some stuff down and that I can look back and reflect. But journaling has been a major part of my coaching practice. I have found it to be extremely beneficial. I simply put everything in one book, but that's just my style. Every coach has their own way of doing journaling. You know, I would put routine tracking, goal setting, reflections, all of it in one book so that it's easy for the athlete to go back and review and look over. But everybody can totally do this to your own way, whatever feels right for you and your team. But there's 8 benefits to journaling for athletes. The one benefit is that the brain is a muscle. It's a muscle we should train. Gymnastics is an extremely mental sport as well as physical. Lots of us as professionals and coaches, we spend a lot of time training the physical and the tiniest little amount of time training the mental part. But we would all agree that the mental part is the biggest part of gymnastics. So I think sometimes we get those ratios a little bit off balance. You know, we're like physical all the time with a little bit of mental. So I recommend trying to increase that amount of mental training to a little bit more than what you would normally do. And you'll be guaranteed to see some positive results. Because we're training the brain is a muscle. We're getting the athletes to sit down, write it down, and think about it, okay? And that's putting the idea in their own minds, making them own it, and that's gonna make a difference. Goals become more clear and attainable. Number 3, it improves self-confidence and self-belief. 4, helps to track progress. 5, improves discipline. 6, forces the athlete to put ideas into their own words. 7, turns the athlete into a better learner. And 8, cultivates self-awareness. So the journaling is going to help the athletes to work on all these other skills, like improving discipline. One that's really important here is forcing the athlete to put ideas into their own words. That's important because as coaches, a lot of the time we're spoon feeding the words to our athletes. We're giving them all of the information. So allowing them the opportunity to process it on their own and to put it into their own words is going to make a big difference. They're going to memorize it better. They're going to feel it better on the inside, and it's going to help them to cultivate that self-awareness, right? And create space for them to learn and continue to grow as athletes. Okay, moving on to self-reflection. So the reason I have journaling before self-reflection is because often self-reflection is done in a journal. But you can do self-reflection in a lot of different ways. So self-reflection is the process of finding out more about oneself in order to improve performance, and it involves some careful thought. So self-reflection should always be centered around self-compassion. We're not trying to beat ourselves down or be negative when we're self-reflecting. Some benefits of self-reflection include understanding your strengths and understanding your weaknesses. So self-reflection and looking back, reflecting gives you an opportunity to look back on your strengths. What did I do well? What was I really strong at? What was I able to contribute? And then looking at your weaknesses. Where was I weak? Where did I mess up? Where could I have tried harder or been more prepared? Whatever that is, when you're reviewing your strengths and your weaknesses, it's gonna help you to self-identify, or it's gonna help your athlete to self-identify so that they are learning and able to change those behaviors or change those patterns in order to perform better the next time. So next, we're going to talk about some topics of reflection with athletes. So when you are doing self-reflection exercises with your athletes, these are the top 3 things that you can start to bring out with those conversations. So one, you want to be asking about their choices and their decisions. Was it a good choice? Was it a bad choice? Was it the right decision? Was it the wrong decision? Then we're going to look at the actions and behaviors. Were your actions positive? Did they have the right effect? Were your behaviors acceptable? Whatever that is, it's important to pull these out. You want to yoke this out or kind of pull it out of your athletes and get them to start to think about it. 3, coaching philosophies and practices. And I've added this in here because topics of reflection with athletes. Athletes spend so much time with their coaches and building that relationship with their coach. But coaches, I don't know if we ask them often enough how we're doing. If the athlete could reflect on their relationship with the coach or with the coach's philosophy or the coach's practices. So that's why this is added in here as a topic of reflection for athletes, because athletes can reflect on that. They can reflect on how their coach responded or how their coach helped them in that situation or didn't. And then it's our job as the professional to review it and read it and learn and take that information so that we can grow as professionals as well. And you have to be a brave coach to put yourself out there and to ask your athletes ways for you to improve. But it's going to make you a better coach, and it's probably going to improve your relationship with your athletes because they're going to trust you. They're going to trust that you can accept a little bit of feedback from them, because we're giving the kids feedback and comments all day long, hitting them with corrections and information. And it's not very often that they get to provide some feedback to us. So opening up that can of worms and opening up that conversation could be extremely beneficial and give you a lot of information to work with as a professional. Next, we're going to talk about the methods and process for reflection. Kind of 3 ideas here. 1, we can take pen to paper. 2, we could have a conversation with a mentor or a seasoned coach. And 3, we can develop and evaluate strategies. So the most common way for reflection is taking a pen to paper, writing it down, maybe videoing yourself, taking a reflection. All that kind of stuff could be really good for you as a process. And then conversation with a mentor or seasoned coach. That one's really important to me, and I think extremely valuable to us as leaders, that we have somebody who we can have a conversation with to reflect on our behaviors and our actions, and someone who's going to provide us with some honest feedback. And that's really critical too. Okay, next we're going to talk about timing. So timing for goal setting, journaling, and self-reflection. When is it a good time to goal set? When is a good time to reflect? How do we work this into our daily training environment? So I just have a simple example of a yearly training plan. It's no one in particular. I don't even think it's totally filled out, but it just gives you a visual example. So as a coach, you're going to look at your yearly training plan and, you know, your peaks and your phases, and it's your job to determine when it would be the most opportune time to work, to set those goals and to have those specific mental training sessions and or reflection sessions. So maybe it's goal setting is happening early on in the preseason, and it's also happening again before the competitive season. And maybe our reflections are happening after every competition, or our reflections are happening once a month. Whatever that is, whatever you determine to be useful, you want to be thinking about the timing and when you're bringing this in. Because if you do goal setting the night before the competition, does that really give the athlete a lot of time to process that goal and to bring it all together? Maybe, maybe not. Depends what the goal would be, what you're trying to achieve. But I've put this in here because I think the timing is really critical. Because we need to give enough time for the brain to process all the information, to process the goal or the reflection, and start to implement those changes. So I recommend that you look at your season plan and determine when would be the best time to do this in your planning. One thing that I've done in the past that has really worked for me is I've built some of these mental sessions just into our end of the week practices, or sometimes we'll end up doing goal setting or reflection kind of like randomly in a week because it just seems to work out. You know, those weeks when your athletes have worked really hard through the early part of the week, Thursday rolls around and they show up to practice and they're just exhausted and they're emotional, and maybe the practice just isn't going exactly the way you wanted it to go. And you're at the end and you've got half an hour left of training and you're like, okay, I could drag these kids through the mud and make them do more conditioning. Or maybe that's the opportunity for you to pull your kids out of the gym, set them up in a comfortable place, and switch gears. Switch it to the mental training aspect. Go train their brain, because their body's obviously fatigued and tired and you're not getting a lot out of them. So that's what has always worked for me. I find if we're getting lost, maybe our attitudes are getting more negative, or we've had a couple practices in a row that weren't successful, those are the times that I'll try to create a space and a time for us to bring it back in, get the kids set up with their journals, and start asking them targeted questions so that they can reflect on what's happened the last few weeks at training. Because sometimes just telling them what happened, saying you showed up on Thursday and you were tired and so we didn't get anything done, it just doesn't do a lot. So instead, putting them, you know, with their pen and paper and saying, well, what did you do this week? Reflect on that. How, you know, did you sleep well? All those other questions you can reflect on, and you can get the athlete to start to process and be like, I was really stressed out all week and I didn't sleep last night, so that's why I had a crappy training today. And they're reflecting on that. Then they're going to learn, okay, well, I have to sleep better and I have to try to de-stress in order to perform better in practice. And you didn't just tell them, you didn't say, hey, you need to sleep better, go to bed early, right? Because kids don't respond well to that. So we want to be making it their idea. So it's our job to create those questions and start to pull it out of them so that they are creating the answer on their own. Okay, so here's a goal setting example for athletes. So at my gym, we just print out these sheets every now and again, or when it's time in our plan, in our season plan, to do goals, whenever that may be. And so this is just a simple example. So this is summer 2020 goals. It's exciting. We're asking the athlete, how many weeks do you want or plan to train? What level did you compete in 2020? What level do you want to compete in 2021? And then you have some blanks for 2021 plans, and they're writing down through the events, vault bars, beam floor, what their goal is on each event. And then we broke it down even further. So this is something we would do in June before our summer training. And then we're going to ask for summer goals. What do you want to spend time on this summer? What do you want to learn? What do you need to be successful for next season? And these are all great questions and reflections and goals to start to get your athletes to think about and write down, especially before you start the summer practice, so that they know what their plan is, what their goal is, and what they're striving for. Okay? This is a reflection worksheet for athletes. So again, just a simple worksheet that I've created for 2020 season reflections. So getting the athlete to look back, what was your main goal for the 2020 season? Do they remember what their main goal was, right? Write it down. Were you able to achieve your goal? Yes, I was. No, I wasn't. Yes, sort of, because I came close. Whatever that is, we want them to write that in there, right? Then, what could you have done differently? That's the reflection piece. Getting the athlete to think, well, I probably should have come to more Sunday practices instead of sleeping in. Okay, great. Then we're going to have a better season for 2021 if we can start to understand that. What helped you to achieve your goal? So if they did achieve the goal and it went well for them, what helped them get there, and having them think about it, and maybe they're like, wow, I went to bed early and I ate really healthy, and that made a huge difference to me achieving my goal. Perfect. That's what we want. We want them to be learning and thinking all the time. So this is for fun. So like I said, I've been doing journaling in my gym for many years, with lots of ages. So these are some journal examples. I'll read them over just because they're sort of funny. And I think it's cute for us to review them and just see what these athletes were doing. So both of these journal entries were written at the same time, and they were written by athletes in grade 10, so 15-year-olds in the winning at all levels stage. So they're able to comprehend the goals and work through. The first one is written by a German exchange student that we had here in Kelowna, so pardon some of her English, but it's lovely to see. So the first question I asked them on this reflection and journal entry was, why do you do gymnastics? Why are you here? So for the first athlete, she says, I do gymnastics because I love it. When I go into the gym, I am in a different world. I don't think about school stuff or other stuff, but what makes me feel sad. Gymnastics is a part of my life. So that athlete, that gives us a lot of insight into that athlete and what gymnastics means to them, why they're there. And that's important as a coach. You need to know why that 15-year-old's coming to practice and what it means to them. Okay? The second athlete here, she writes on her reason why. I am here because I love getting away from the stress and chaos of school. I love being a part of a team and surrounding myself with friends and teammates. I enjoy staying healthy and fit while maintaining a healthy diet. The adrenaline rush you get from learning a new skill is the best feeling. Okay, so for that athlete, it's all about having fun and learning new skills. And that's good insight for me as the coach, because I know that athlete's not all about maybe all the details. That athlete's about coming to practice and working hard. And that's good for us to start to understand. So you want to let the athletes do their journaling and their reflections. And sure, they can keep a lot to themselves, but it's really, really good insight if you can flip through their books afterwards and just have a quick read, because it gives you so much quick information that they're not telling you in practice and in training, okay? We asked the athletes what their goal was for the season. And so the first athlete is talking about a competition in San Diego. San Diego is one of my biggest competition that I ever did or going to do. I never had a competition in a different country, and I'm really excited about this. This is also one of my first competitions after 1.5-year break. I hope this competition that I will do all my elements that I really want to do. And so that's a great goal for this athlete. That's great information for us. Okay, it's going to be a big deal for her to go to that San Diego competition because she hasn't competed for 1.5 years. And it's important for us to understand that. And then further down with athlete 1, at the bottom, we just wrote what their biggest goal is for the season. And for this athlete, her goal was to come back. And she has a few skills listed. And then for her, it's important to do her conditioning elements, mental training for competition, do every training her best with conditioning, and to never give up, and to not hurt again or have another injury. Those are great goals. It's not a perfect goal. It's lacking some of those SMART goal setting requirements, but it's there. She's talking about it. It's written. For our second athlete, she is talking about her experience and what she wants out of the experience in San Diego. So she wants to experience the pressure and adrenaline from the clean and sharp American gymnasts. I want to see how the other gymnasts perform and show it off. Okay, and then she writes her short-term goal. And this is great from this athlete. She writes, my goal is to have shoot over on the set by myself in the next, she writes 2 to 3 months, and then scratches it out and goes 1 to 2 months. Every day I will set a program and take steps to get here. So that was maybe one of those moments where me as the coach or as the leader, I had to say, well, just so you know, your competition is actually in 4 weeks or in 6 weeks. So 2 to 3 months puts you a little past, when we would really like to have that skill ready. And so the athlete goes, oh, okay, I'm going to have to tighten that up a little bit and work harder to get there. Again, not a perfect goal. It doesn't have all of the elements written out, but it has the general idea. And this wasn't a particular exercise just for goal setting. It was a moment where I was trying to get the athletes to reflect on why they're here, why we're going to San Diego, what that means to them, and then what their goal for the season could be. And this was probably one of those Thursday nights when the kids were gassed and we were out of steam. And so we went up into the dance room or somewhere quiet where we could work on our journals, and the athletes could really hone in on their selves and their feelings and reflect. And that was a really great exercise. And this is something that we do all the time. And you really get some amazing, amazing information out of your athletes. So I highly recommend doing journaling, reflection, and reviewing them and staying close with your athletes so that you're learning who they are, what makes them tick, what makes them set goals and work hard to achieve them. Okay, so then I'm gonna move into the reflection for coaches part, and something called an R card, which is simply just a reflection card. Really, really common in other sports, hockey, soccer, rugby. Coaches of those other sports, they're doing R cards quite often when they're working with teams, probably after every practice. So an R card is a simple reflection card at the end of each training. Reflection cards, as opposed to a reflective journal, take a few minutes to complete, are straight to the point, and can provide valuable information that coaches can compile and review. So the R card is more beneficial maybe for us as the leaders or the coaches because it's quicker, it's more to the point. So the questions on an R card would be something like, briefly describe the training session, evaluate what went well and what went not so well, explain what went well and what did not, propose improvements for the next training session. And this can be quickly written out quickly in 1 or 2 sessions, maybe between you or you and your partner coach, and you can compare your cards and go, were we on the same page? What can we do different next time? I think implementing something like an R card at the end of your week or at the end of your sessions with your groups could really help as a coach and as a professional to develop. So personal reflection for coaches, some things that we can reflect on constantly is things like our coaching values and our philosophy. Are we staying true to our values? Are we exemplifying our philosophy? Behaviors and choices, relationships, actions, and skills and abilities. Do we have the skill or ability? Do we need more courses? Do we need more information? These are all things that we can reflect on as professionals. The image that I've added on this slide here is the rear view mirror. So it's an analogy because when you're driving forward quickly, it is sort of blurry on the side and you're not totally 100% sure what's in front of you. You can see a little bit in front fairly clearly, right? But you don't see that far, far part in the future. So that's why it's kind of blurred out there. But what is super clear to you in that moment is the image in the rear view mirror, that reflecting back image. So it's crystal clear. We know what we've passed. We know what was behind us. So we have a crystal clear view that we can look back on and review. And so that's just an analogy, I think, that helps coaches to understand the concept of reflection and the value that we have in it. So some reflection questions to ask yourself. What could I do differently from a personal standpoint the next time I work with the same group or a different one? What's the one thing about myself above all others that I would like to work to improve? How can I better support and encourage my teammates on future projects? How will I use what I've learned in the future? So I've just put these here as simple examples for us as the adults and as the leaders to use to review. And maybe we do this once a year, or we do this at the end of a competition, whenever it is. But just know there's a lot of questions that you can ask yourself to reflect back on your behaviors, on your actions, on your decisions and your choices. And it's going to make a difference to you as a professional coach. Okay, I've made this slide for some practical applications, just because I know I did the long-term athlete development stages for some goal setting and reflection. And then this is just kind of another way for me to break it down for you guys to understand. So maybe for recreational classes or athletes, goal setting or reflection could maybe be done twice a session. And it could be done verbally to the coach, written down, or perhaps we want to support the athlete with goals that stretch their limits but are achievable. So we're challenging them, but we're giving them achievable challenges. And then for high performance, the goals and reflection should be calculated, methodical, practical, or significant. Okay, they should really matter. So this is just another way to kind of break that down and to assess who am I coaching, where can I implement some goal setting or reflection, how can I build this into my programming and into my daily coaching practice. Failure. What if you don't succeed? What if your athlete doesn't succeed? So this is a really good conversation and something that you need to keep open, because failure does occur. There are times when we set the perfect goal, we write out the plan, and we put all of our effort into it, and it just doesn't work, and we've failed. And this is a moment that, as leaders, it's our job to approach with self-compassion or compassion, depending on if it's you who failed or perhaps your athlete who had some failure. Okay? You want to learn from the outcome, adapt for next time, reinforce the positive moments, and ultimately let it go. It's just sport. It happened. We have to move on from that. So failure does occur, and it's our job to make sure that we're approaching failure with compassion and ensuring that we have the best interest of the athlete in our heart, as well as ourselves. We're not being hard on ourselves when we did not succeed, okay? Moving on, we're gonna talk about professionalization of coaching as a career using goal setting and reflection. So coaching, the NCCP, along with the university like UBC and the Advanced Coaching Diploma, there's a lot of programs and groups like the PSOs and the NSOs who are striving to professionalize us as leaders and as coaches. And it's important that we're using goal setting and reflection to continue to improve ourselves. So things that we personally should do is we should assess our values. We should be setting goals for how you will exemplify your values. We should reflect to notice if you are actually doing it. You need to act in a way that is positive for those around you and yourself. 2020, gymnastics is different now. It is evolving, and we are a part of that. So are we reflecting on the changes that have occurred in the last 10, 20, 30 years? Are we setting goals for the future? It's important to reflect on behaviors and acknowledge them to make a change. If we don't reflect on our behaviors or our actions, we won't be able to change, and therefore we won't be able to grow or become stronger professionals. We want to constantly adapt to changing environments or rules. So it's important that we are reflecting on our environment or the rules. We have to hold ourselves accountable to the highest standards of coaching and leading. And that's critical, and I think that's where we can really get value from goal setting and reflection, is it forces us to hold ourselves accountable to those high standards of coaching and professionalizing our career. So we'll review some of the concepts from this presentation. We're almost done. What we want to go over here is just goal setting can be developed to fit all the stages of athlete development. So there's been a lot of examples throughout this presentation and ways that you can break down goal setting so that you can target the particular stage and age range of an athlete that you're working with. Use SMART goals as a foundation and build upon that. Some goals or plans may need tweaking throughout, especially while learning to goal set and reflect. Example, early developmental stages. So in those early developmental stages, when we're beginning to introduce goal setting concepts, we may need to adjust them or tweak them throughout to help our athletes. We can use online tools or books to help us get ideas. Reflection helps us grow and develop as humans. Benefits to journaling and short reflection exercises. There are benefits to journaling and short reflection exercises for athletes and coaches. The concepts can be altered to fit the right situation and always have the best interest of the athlete at heart. And that's really important. That's what I'm trying to drive home here. The goals that these athletes are setting, it's their goals. It's about them. So it's our job to support them to our best ability and ensure that we're guiding them to an intelligent situation for them and a safe place for them in sport. So in conclusion, what we know is that goal setting and reflection is good for athletes and coaches. I'm reiterating it again, but it's super important that we're implementing these ideas and processes, and we're reflecting on ourselves and we're reflecting with our athletes. Scheduled or impromptu sessions of reflection or goal setting can help uncover strengths and weaknesses. Reach out to mentors to help hold yourself accountable to your goals. That one's really important. I highly recommend, if you don't have somebody who you can reach out to, try to find someone. Reach out to somebody and ask them, will you be my mentor? Would you be comfortable listening to me reflect on some of my coaching practices, whatever that might be. I know there's a lot of coaches and leaders out there who would love to help anybody who's starting to learn. Have a plan for mental training sessions. Lots of stars. Include them in your workouts. Build them into your practice. I know it's hard, and a lot of the time we don't want to waste time sitting down and writing in books. So if that's how you feel about it, that's okay. Then you need to create worksheets and be able to send them home with your athletes so that you can review them later. Or maybe you're staying 5 or 10 minutes late after a practice so that you can include those sessions in your workouts. But it's really important that you're building them in and you're making time for those mental training sessions. Then we always want to make sure we're writing it down in a place where we can review it. So that goes for goal setting, journaling, and reflection. We want to have it in a place where we can look back and review to see if we are on track and to hold ourselves accountable for our goals and our ideas. So that's it for me. If there's any questions, you guys can reach out now. I would love to answer them, or if anybody has comments or ideas that they've done for their goal setting sessions in their gyms, if you have ideas beyond what I've talked about. I know I've just skimmed on the surface of what goal setting and reflection could be, but please let me know or reach out anytime.
Thank you so much, Jessie. Really, really appreciate that. So as you mentioned, you can type any questions into the chat box now. If you need to let it stew for a little bit and you have questions following this session, you can always send me an email to coaching@gymbc.org, and I'd be happy to connect you with Jessie at a later point to answer those questions. So I'll give you guys just a minute here to type anything in, and otherwise we'll close out our session today.
And thank you everyone for coming. It's lovely.
Oh, we just had one come in. Can you tell us again what the program at UBC that you took is called?
Yes, I can even write it in the chat box. So I took it starts with a graduate certificate in high performance coaching and technical leadership. And then once you've completed the graduate certificate, you can apply into the master's program, which is a master's in high performance coaching and technical leadership through UBC. I just finished and I was the second cohort, and I started September of 2016. So this is the 5th year, I believe, that UBC has had the program. It's through UBC Vancouver. It's all online and through webinars and self-learning. It's amazing. The professors are outstanding. The access to networking is amazing. And then the other part of the master's program, the high performance coaching program, that's really, really beneficial is that it's a multi-sport program. So it's not just gymnastics coaches, it's coaches from across the country and internationally who are striving to be their best in their own sport, in their field. So, and it also has that technical leadership piece. So within your cohort, if you're taking that program, you might have other high performance coaches or leaders, or maybe provincial sport organization leaders or university coaches amongst you. And I think that for me was the biggest benefit, was just learning from other sports. How are they doing things? And how can I bring that into my work with gymnastics? So yeah, if anybody's interested, it's amazing and it's worth it. You can coach at the same time as do the program, and it is possible. So do it. I'll write it down.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I'm very passionate about the program. That's great to hear.
Yeah, well, and they'll take coaches based on your certification. So you don't have to have an undergraduate degree to get in. So if you're an outstanding coach who has the certification that's required to get into the program, you can apply for the program. And I think that's the other amazing part, is that they're professionalizing coaching. They're giving coaches a place where they can go and get a degree the same as everybody else, so that we can be professionals, or viewed as professionals. We are already.
Perfect. Well, I think that was the last question that came in. So thank you again, Jessie, for leading this session today. I appreciate the wealth of knowledge that you're sharing with our coaching community. It's been very, very beneficial for everybody. So I appreciate your time.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Hopefully we can go coach soon.
Yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed for everybody who's on this call. Coaching soon.
Yeah.
Clubs open, please, please.
Yeah.
So Thank you again to all the attendees for participating today. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us and listen to Jesse's talk. Like I mentioned, if you have any questions, please just send them to coaching@gymbc.org, and I'd be happy to forward them along, and you guys can connect offline. As always, I did send out the details for the webinar this morning, and there is a post-webinar survey, so if you guys have time to fill that out, it just provides some feedback for Jesse as well as us on our webinar development, any future content that we could develop for you guys, and your feedback on all of our webinars so far. So thank you so much for taking the time. Again, thank you everybody for being here, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Bye, thank you.
Bye everyone.